good facilitation is kind of invisible because
Yeah.
it's not about you as the facilitator. It is about the group and what can you do to encourage those connections between the group.
Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Helping People Perform. And delighted to be joined in the studio today by facilitator, coach, speaker, and author. We have Felicity Dwyer from Felicity Dwyer Facilitation. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this, and I'm sure we've got loads to talk about in the world of facilitation and beyond. But maybe let's kick off with what got you to where you are today. What's your background story?
Thank you. Well, I'll keep it quite brief. I've been self-employed for the last 20 years, so I'm obviously enjoying it.
Yeah.
My background just before moving into the self-employment world was as a communications manager in a voluntary organisation. It was looking at strategic skills development in the voluntary sector.
Yeah.
And I got that job in the first place. I won't go through all my previous history, but because I could very clearly show that I've got a commitment to lifelong learning and
Right.
I love to learn in different ways and I've always invested in my own learning, which is something I do
Right.
encourage everyone to think about doing. And I really enjoyed the job. It was primarily research and communication of information. We worked across Great Britain, so we got the
Okay.
opportunity to work with people in different parts of the country. But I was looking and getting to know more about what was happening on the ground. I thought actually I'd really like more of a hands-on role, working with people directly.
Mm.
And a couple of little triggers, I suppose, and one of them I'll talk about. I had the opportunity at the organisation to be part of a learning group, a peer learning group.
Okay.
So we brought particular challenges, things we wanted to talk about, opportunities we wanted to engage with. And not only did I love the group and learn a lot from it, but I found a role model or an inspiration in the facilitator for that group,
Right.
who's called Maggie. And we ended up working together in a business. She's retired recently, but we worked together for many years. But it was that gave me a sense of, oh, this is something I could do. This is something I might enjoy.
Yep.
So that gave me the idea of facilitation as a career. And I explored facilitation. I'd had the opportunity at the organisation to start training and coaching as well. So I explored coaching and training. So I've sort of brought all that together and decided I'm going to give it a go
Right.
myself. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years.
Ah, fantastic. I mean, out of interest, had facilitation ever been on your radar before that moment?
Not as not as something I really thought I could do.
Right.
However, I'd started doing a master's, not a master's, a BA in person-centered counselling, and that was very much a facilitated group.
Right.
And I do remember at one point thinking, oh, I might like to be a facilitator. And I got a little, I think, shiver up my spine, which I've learned is always a good, good
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah.
But at that point, it seemed too far from where I was.
Right.
So it was the second time that it really hit home. So I think sometimes you get a little bit of an inkling, but
Mm.
maybe the time's not right, your skill set, your experience isn't right.
Right.
So it was the combination of, having got some management experience, understanding a sector,
Yeah.
and seeing the opportunity that when all those things came together, that felt like, oh, this could be a career direction.
Yeah. So that experience, that direct experience and the empathy of people in that role has sort of gave you the confidence to go
Yeah.
into the world of facilitation. Yeah. I
Yes.
mean, from my side, it was similar from facilitation wasn't anything I ever grew up even knowing what the word meant really. And then the opportunities come about and then you go, oh, actually, this is something that I really enjoy doing, and it seems to give people value. And I think it's something that isn't raised enough from people in terms of getting great careers out of it from maybe an earlier stage. But as you say, that experience and that empathy can build up over time to help you become a better facilitator as well. So, wonderful. Yeah, and you said there something about being a sort of lifelong learner. What's that meant to you over, when did that kick off, and what's that been as part of your career and your movement in terms of your career so far?
Yes. Well, I can tell you exactly when it kicked off. It was when I was 24.
Okay.
And my background before that, I left school after A levels. I'd had enough of education. I hadn't had a great school experience. And it was only a few years later that I thought, actually, I'd like to learn something.
Hmm.
And I did a 1 day workshop in acting, improvisation.
Right.
And that, I would say, that did change my life, that workshop, in that not only did I go on to study acting for a while and really got a lot from that in terms of personal development and being involved in community theatre, not professional theatre, but for community. But also it opened up a door to just realizing I love to learn. So
Right.
I've taken myself through, I started a counselling qualification, ended up sort of going down a different route into management, but I've taken myself through coaching, facilitation, all kinds of training and learning. And I still do today. I mean, every year I allocate funds to personal and professional development.
Right.
And I find it very exciting. And one of the things that I've found as well is the value from learning something and then sharing it, teaching it.
Mm.
So, with the topics I train on, because that's sort of part of what I do, I'm very familiar with my topics, but every time I do it, I try to add something new. I try to be constantly expanding my knowledge and expertise so that I can, provide what people need in a given context, provide them with something that's helpful, not just a fairly rigid
Yeah.
syllabus, but to, be constantly, hopefully, learning, growing and sharing, I think.
Brilliant. And what, if anything, and this not always the case in terms of anything for a lot of the facilitators that I've met over the years, including myself for a long part of my career, what sort of professional training or development did you get in facilitation?
Yes, I got a fair amount. Firstly, I started off actually by volunteering
Okay.
to do a facilitation role. This was with managers in the voluntary sector. And the deal, if you like, was that you got fantastic training
Yeah.
run by Maggie, as it happened, and
Yeah.
another person. And in return, that you gave your time to facilitate groups. So that
Right.
was really early on.
Mm.
Um, since then, the main things I've done, I'm a Time to Think facilitator, a licensed part of the Time to Think Collegiate. So
Okay.
that was really helpful. And I'm also certified clean facilitator, which is the use of clean language.
Right.
And I use that in coaching and with groups. I'd probably say that Time to Think facilitation is the core of my skill set in terms of the training that I've participated in.
Right. Yeah, it just surprises me the different routes that people have come into the world of facilitation. And quite often, there's been no formal training there. They've literally been the person in the business who is willing to put their hand up, and they've gone, do you know what? I kind of like that. I want to do more of it, and they sort of progress into the career there, which is kind of where I came from in the early days. But then I had one bit of training, a proper facilitation training course run by a guy called Dr. Richard Allen, and that was a game changer for me. It was one course, a bit like what you mentioned earlier on, that actually changed how I behave. From the day it happened, is like, I'm going to do things differently from now on. And I think that's, for me, as the sort of epitome of any training or learning process. It's actually, do you change your behavior off the back of it? Otherwise, it's just been interesting at best and a waste of time at worst in some ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing that you took from that course that you could share with
Ah.
other facilitators, what could that be?
One thing at a time. So when you want a group, particularly a larger group, to stand up, turn around and sit down, you say stand up. And then you wait. It feels awful at times. You wait for them to stand up. Once everybody is stood up, you then say, now turn around. And you wait for everybody to turn around, and some will have done it straight away. Some will be looking at their phones and doing so. And then, right, and now sit down. And that, if you can learn that one trick of one instruction at a time, it feels unnatural, but it really works, particularly for large groups. That's my key bit that I provide. There you go. The host being interviewed. I love this. So maybe that brings us nicely into what you do today. Then, so tell us about Felicity Dwyer Facilitation. Excuse me, in terms of who you help and how you help them.
Thank you. Yes, I would say there's two main strands, plus a few extras. The first one is facilitation of workshops, seminars, and learning programs for managers. So
Okay.
this is where it's training workshops really,
Yep.
and it tends to be I work with first line managers and emerging leaders. So then they tend to be the first line managers, middle managers.
Yep.
The second aspect that I'm doing regularly at the moment is facilitation of learning groups for senior managers. And this is a bit different because I'm not providing content here. I am purely holding the structure and the space for people to learn from each other.
Right.
So that's more pure facilitation. It's more how I started this training route, that I participated in these kind of groups. So I really enjoy that.
Mm.
I would say there's similarities and differences between the two. I would say both types involve holding a structure for people. I think it's really important to have a clear structure to create a safe space. And you do that by including boundaries, by modeling ground rules, how people might behave. So I think that's really, really important in all kinds of facilitation work.
Yep.
I think there's always important to balance the structure and flexibility. So I mentioned earlier that, I like to bring in different elements in my training from what I'm learning. And you cannot download everything you know about a topic. It's more about, if you're delivering a course, finding a structure for it, including what you think are the most important elements, but then being able to respond to what's in the room.
Right.
That may include providing different information or adjusting an exercise. So I think getting that balance right is really important.
Yep.
But I think it's really, really important to keep that structure, including, very importantly, ending on time, that kind of thing. I think that's really, really important and perhaps underestimated, because the more you provide safety and structure, actually, the more people can be challenged and speak out. And the ground rules, if you like, that you're modeling are things like respect and people being able to be challenged, but not in a way that personally attacks people. I'm not a trainer that would ever put anyone down. It's more that kind of, this is a really safe space to be challenged and speak out.
Yeah.
And the third element is, it's all about connection and helping people to connect with each other,
Right.
from each other. And mostly that is something that happens. It happens all the time. And I think sometimes you may have found this yourself, that good facilitation is kind of invisible, because it's not about you as the facilitator. It is about the group and what can you do to encourage those connections between the group. So that's probably another similarity.
Yeah.
The difference is really whether I'm bringing in content or not between those types of work.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I completely sort of resonate with a lot of what you're saying there, particularly that element of facilitation, and good facilitation is invisible. People should feel as if, we've got through that, we've had a great time, but, what happened? They don't need to know the process, but they need to feel as if they've moved on and got value out of the session. And I think that's an ego piece that a lot of facilitators just need to bear in mind. It's not about you. It's about the audience. It's about taking them through. And I just wanted to follow up on that piece about connection, because I'm looking over your shoulder there and I'm seeing Crafting Connections. Obviously, the book that you've written. Can you tell us a bit more about Crafting Connections and what that's all about?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, Crafting Connection, it's what I tried to do with the book. I felt like I really wanted to get some ideas together and pull together almost like lots of the pieces I've learned over the last 20 years. And I came up with this structure, which I call connecting in 3 dimensions.
Okay.
But it's connecting within, so that's connecting with yourself,
Yep.
connecting with other people, and a large part of the book is around that interpersonal communication, and they're the topics I tend to focus on in my training and facilitation, and also connecting beyond, which is about that wider networks and communities, and obviously that includes the organisation, community of the organisation in which we're all embedded.
Yeah.
And the part I think that's had the most love perhaps is the connecting within.
Okay.
And if you think about it, firstly, in any kind of communication, you're always there.
Yep.
It starts. And also the relationship that you have with yourself, you need to keep that fresh and interesting and getting to know yourself in different ways. So I look at different ways to do that. Partly is connecting with your body,
Right.
getting that comfortable in your own skin, if you like. I think
Mm,
that's important. And getting to know the way you think. So
mm,
not just what you think, but sort of almost being able to observe your thought processes to a little bit of an extent.
right.
And it's in that gap between, observing what you're thinking and actually acting on it that you can make a change.
Right.
So, in any kind of leadership or management development, that self-awareness is so important.
Yeah.
And this book tries to show you how to do that, ways to do that.
Brilliant.
And just one more example from that section. It's like thinking about the stories we tell ourselves,
Right.
because to go back to something earlier, I probably could and I did through a lot of my 20s, I haven't got a degree, I couldn't do this, I sort
Right.
of limited myself. And now from this vantage point, looking back, I can see, well, not having that conventional education has helped me to really see
Mm,
how you can build a career through following your interests, following what you want to learn about, and gradually building up a skill set that hopefully people will be interested in. So, and you can do that for yourself by taking a step back and thinking, okay, is there another way of seeing this? So it's those kind of things,
right.
getting to know yourself in different ways.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I think there's two bits that really strike home with me there. One is the ability to understand yourself. And I think in the world of facilitation, and any world really, but facilitation in particular, if you want to differentiate yourself and be out there and people wanting to buy your time as a facilitator, then knowing yourself and how you deal with this, how you operate, is gives you a chance to differentiate yourself and give yourself a good market position on that front. And the other bit that sticks home is I've always been this advocate of most people know what to do. What they struggle with is how to do it. So any book, any sort of training that helps people with this is how to get there. It's not what to do. It's how do you go about this process? Because
Yeah.
if they can go about that process and follow a process in itself, follow some steps, but are doing the work themselves, then one, it gets the result, but also teaches them how to do that as well. So, I applaud you for that, and I'll certainly be getting my hands on a copy of the book and looking at that for myself. So, really, great stuff. And I think having, let me ask you this question then: how has having the book affected how you facilitate, or the clients that you get? Has that been a major in for you? Is it
I think it definitely has given, it's built my confidence
right?
more, and I draw on it in all sorts of training, and certainly in the second part, connecting with other people, which
Right.
is the bulk of what I do is helping people to connect with other people in different ways, whether that's, just in the way they lead their teams or how they facilitate meetings, or coaching skills is another topic that I train managers in, the basics of coaching. So
Yeah.
I draw a lot on the book, and I think most people who buy the book are people who come to my courses and like what I do, and I think it should be the other way around
Right.
really. But it's, I think when people get to know you and they see you in action, I think, oh yes, she's got something helpful to say.
Right. Yeah.
So from that point of view, I think it's been useful to have people something to offer people that isn't just a handout, that
Right.
goes in a little bit of depth, and as you say, really practical.
Mm.
It's intended to be practical for people to actually take away and use the ideas themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I just couldn't let this episode go by. Now that we're talking about connecting with others, I couldn't let it go by without a shout out to Kirsty Lewis, who we're both connected to in the School of Facilitation world, because it's those networks and those bits there that really help people to understand that they're not on their own. Even if you are a one person operation or a one person offering in some ways, which facilitators often are, then knowing that there are other people that you can learn from, you can bounce ideas off, you can connect with, and learn the art of facilitation through that as well. I think so. A big shout out to Kirsty and at this
Yeah,
stage.
Yeah, and it's brilliant that she's created that community.
Yeah.
And something I talk about in the third part of the book, the Connecting Beyond, is the importance of having both networks of, people who are doing similar things to you, so
Yes.
facilitators, coaches. I'm very active in the local coaches network, and also having networks of people who do quite different things, because it's really important to get those other perspectives as well. So an example might be a small business development network. So
Yes.
people who are doing different jobs or have different businesses, but who are also sharing some of those same challenges.
Yeah.
Having those different networks is really useful. And I think it's also really important to open yourself up to ideas from people that you don't naturally agree with.
Yep.
It's really important to get out of your silo, or get out of your
Yeah.
habitual way of thinking, and allow yourselves to be challenged or even a little bit offended at times, because it provides a little bit of a mirror for you to think, what is it that I'm not comfortable with? That, could I be wrong, or has this just confirmed for me why I think this way? But almost without that little bit of grit in the oyster, sometimes,
Right.
it can be difficult to keep that continual process of learning, growing, understanding yourself and
Yeah.
understanding others.
Yeah, the ability to learn from colliding perspectives, that's a key one for any of us to take away from this as well. So, oh, brilliant. And I always like to ask, particularly sort of facilitators, coaches, and people who are providing a lot of their energy to help others, perform at their best. What do you do? How do you sort of make sure that you're on top of your game and performing at your best?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great question. When I think about the difference between me performing, well enough, maybe running a good session, and me performing at my best, which is hopefully running an outstanding session, the difference is my state.
Okay.
Now, of course, it's not the only difference, because, there's different group dynamics and other things going on. But if I just think about what I bring to the party, the state management is a large part of it. So that means being really present, having, as you say, the energy
Yeah.
to hold the group, to hopefully inspire people, and also switch between that speaking and listening, because very much part of the facilitative approach
Mm.
is listening. For example, when I train, I go for the boardroom style, sit around the table with people,
Right.
unless it's a bigger group and needs to be cafe style or something. But with a small group, when I'm facilitating, I will be part of the group. I won't be at the front. And then I might need to step up to give a short presentation. So it's almost like you have to switch between these
Yeah.
two modes, and all that takes energy. And what helps me get into these positive states, which is what
Yeah.
I'm talking about, my passion is dancing. So I do need to find ways outside of work to dance and move, and that helps me express myself. And not saying that everyone should dance, of course, but it's finding that one
Yeah.
thing that really helps you feel resourced.
Yeah.
Also, just in the immediate preparation, I think doing a little body scan, coming into my body, I think
Mm.
that's really helps, because that's what gives you a presence. Maybe a little bit of breathing, because that helps you, calm if you're a little bit nervous, your emotional state. So doing all those sorts of things, which I often suggest to people that I do, but it's important to do it yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing, just more generally in my working week, is I like a difference of cadence between work when I'm working with people, which
Mm.
is energizing, and also work where, desk work, planning, preparation, and
Mm.
trying to get a balance of that throughout the week, or trying to get a balance of in-person and online facilitation. And personally, I'm an ambivert, so I like being out there and I like having time to myself. But what doesn't work for me is if I have too much of one.
Right.
I need, if I get that balance right, that really helps me, perform. So that's a little bit about my diary management, what I say yes to, what I say no to.
Yeah. And that all goes back to connecting with yourself, doesn't it? In
Yeah.
terms of knowing what it is that gives you the energy to be
Yeah.
at your best. And I think that's some great examples on that front. So appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a couple of different questions then. If you could work with or help any individual or team or organization with the skill set that you've got, who would you want that to be?
Okay. Well, sector less important. It could be an SME, could be a charity, could be a small local authority like a town council. But the situation where I think I can really help is where you've got different departments working in silos.
Okay.
And something that I've done successfully in the past, and where I think my skill set can really help, is helping people to come together across like a horizontal network across the organization to understand each other's roles and challenges.
Right.
And so that's the kind of work that where I feel I can bring quite a lot to the party.
Brilliant. Yeah, and as you say, that's so applicable across any industry or sector, isn't it? There's always going to be that element of high performing teams, can in particular can focus on what is right in front of them, but actually, how do you perform across those groups and how do you perform across those silos? So, brilliant. So, if there's any of those groups out there looking for some facilitation support, do give Felicity a shout. So let's flip it on its head a little bit. If you could sit down and have a coffee, have a meal, have a drink with somebody that you think could really help with up your game and improve your performance, who would you want that to be?
Well, there's somebody I really admire. I will produce the book here.
Uh-huh.
BJ Fogg, PhD, who's the author of Tiny Habits. And he's a Stanford researcher, and he's really researched into what helps us create and maintain good habits.
Right.
And the ideas have been covered in other books, such as Atomic Habits and so forth. But my understanding is he's done quite a lot of the actual research on this.
Okay.
And he seems like a great guy. If you buy the book, you can also get access to some good videos.
Okay.
It's got some simple models to help you understand, how to create good habits. And one of the things is giving yourself like an immediate little reward.
Okay.
And part of the way you do that is learn how to create a good feeling in your body. So again, it comes back to the connecting with the body.
Right.
But certainly, when I was writing my book, particularly, I drew on some of his ideas to help me maintain that habit of writing regularly, which, is, if anyone's tried to write a book, it's not always the easiest thing. And so I feel I would have a lot to learn from.
Nice. Well, as always, I'll put the links to the books, including your own book, but also I'll put a link to that Tiny Habits book in there as well, so that people can check that out for themselves. So, if we were to give the audience one tip or one thing that sums up the key lessons from your perspective in terms of everything we've talked about today, what would be the one thing that the audience should be taking away from this talk?
The one thing I would invite everyone to do is to start with connection and connecting with yourself, getting to know yourself, understand yourself. And in your interpersonal communications, your conversation at work, whether you're facilitating a meeting, leading a team member, coaching someone to improve, focus on the connection with them, understand them, do a little bit more listening first, so you can get where they're coming from. So to focus on the connection, and even if you're dealing with quite a difficult conversation, if you focus on, how can I connect and understand this person, rather than, any anxieties you have about the conversation or trying to get it over with or whatever that might be. But if you just come back to yourself, acknowledge how you're feeling and work on connecting with the other person, it can really help perhaps a difficult conversation turn into an opportunity to understand somebody more and potentially help them more.
Brilliant. That's a great bit of advice that I'm sure we can all take in any of the conversations, any of the connections that we're having throughout our day-to-day lives. So really appreciate that, Felicity. I mean, so much great stuff there. If people want to find out more, if they want to connect with you, learn about the book, learn about your services, where should they go?
Okay, two places. My website is felicitydwyer.com. So there's information there about my workshops, my facilitation, and of course, a little bit more about the book.
Yeah.
And the second place where I'm quite active is LinkedIn. So I very much welcome LinkedIn connections.
Brilliant. And as always, we'll put those connections in the show notes so that people can find those very easily. It's been an amazing conversation, and I love the way in which you're focusing on connections to help people perform, either perform through themselves or with others, and with wider teams and communities beyond that. So thanks so much for today. It's been very insightful, and thanks for being on the show today, Felicity Dwyer.
And thank you, Paul, for inviting me. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.